Good morning, children. It's nice to see you all back once again in a new month. I thank and praise God for giving us this new month, and I hope that He will protect us from all the challenges which we have to face in the course of this month. Well, today in our class, we will start a new unit, unit number 3. So, in the third unit, today we will begin with the prose lesson. The prose lesson given to us in the third unit is In Celebration of Being Alive, written by Dr. Christian Barnard. I think you can see the lesson displayed on the screen. So let us try to understand the meaning of the title and then let us move to the lesson. So, in celebration of being alive, so we celebrate for so many things, so many incidents which happen in our life. But what the author, Dr. Christian Barnard, says, the most important thing to celebrate is being alive. It's not about achieving, it's not about becoming rich or being gifted by so many other things. But most important thing is being alive. So here in this lesson, he's going to share us something which he learned from physically handicapped, physically challenged people. That's what he's going to share in this lesson. Well, Dr. Christian Barnard might be a very familiar name for few of the students. In fact, he was the first person, he's a doctor himself, cardiologist. He was the first person to do heart transplant surgery. That is, replacing a heart from another person. That was He was the first person to do that surgery. So before we learn something about the author, in our screen you can see the warm up part. So he tells about the kind of attitude which this physically, which these physically challenged people have. So there are several physically challenged people in this world who have lived successful and meaningful lives, which you might know many people who had been successful, in spite of being physically challenged. Here are a few personalities who have fought great odds and lived a life of blazing achievements. No, they have never shown that their physical inability has been a distraction, has been a blockage in any sector. They have never shown anything like that. So let's share what we know about each of them. Now, some examples are given on your screen in the textbook in the warm up part. So let's see what we learn from them. Now, Beethoven. So the nature of challenge which he had was hearing impairment. He can't hear well, but the achievement which he made in the field, which field he made his achievement was in the field of music. He can't hear anything, but still he can compose music. That is an amazing skill. And next, you would have heard the name of Demosthenes. Now, he is a great Greek orator, great speaker, and the field which he achieved, is in a speech. His writing and the way he has addressed a few things, are still spoken in today's world. Helen Keller. I think Helen Keller is another very familiar character. So Helen Keller was deaf and blind both, but the achievement which she made was she was the first physically handicapped person to finish her bachelor degree. And Mariappan Thangavelu, very recently, a few years before, he was from Tamil Nadu. In fact, he is handicapped. You saw him winning the high jump, in Paralympic event. And then Mozart. Mozart was once again he was deaf, and again he composed music. And John Milton, a great English poet, he was blind and he achieved in the field of poetry, or you can also say literature generally, because he was the one who wrote the only epic in English language that is Paradise Lost. And last name which is given in the textbook, Sudha Chandran. So Sudha Chandran was a handicapped woman, and she became a great dancer. She's still alive, and you would have watched her dances in many events as well. So in so many events, you can see all these physically challenged people have achieved. Now let's learn something about the author before coming to the lesson. So the author, Christian Neething Barnard was born in rural South Africa in 1922 to poor parents as their four children. He evinced great interest in his academics and was determined to pursue medicine after the loss of his brother to a cardiac ailment. He won many scholarships and pursued his higher studies, specializing in cardiac surgery. As a cardiac surgeon, Barnard focused on congenital, especially which happens from birth, any disease which happens from birth, and complicated cardiac conditions for which there was no cure at that time. After experimenting with heart transplantation on animals, he performed the world's first human to human heart transplant in the year 1967. That's when he did his first heart transplant. He gained worldwide recognition and went on to develop many surgery techniques which are being adopted till date. Bernard he has penned 14 books, he's written 14 books and 235 scientific articles that have been published in reputed journals. Some of his books are One Life, 50 Ways to a Healthy Heart, The Best Medicine, and The Faith. A pioneer in cardiac surgery, he obtained a doctorate in medicine from the University of Cape Town, that is in South Africa. This was followed by 11 honorary doctorates bestowed upon him by universities all over the world. He has also received 36 international awards. 36 international awards he has achieved. In his late years, he established the Christian Barnard Foundation to serve and promote the cause of underprivileged children throughout the world, and he died at the age of 78 in the year 2001. So this was something about the author Barnard, Christian Barnard. So now we are going to move on to the lesson. It's really a very inspiring lesson that everybody should learn in our life, because we always curse God or we lose no hope whenever we get into trouble. But what does this trouble really teach us? And what did Christian Barnard? He himself had his own way of complaining, why things happen in this world like this, and he happened to find an answer when he faced something. No, or I can say when he learned something from the physically challenged people. So let's get into the lesson. So we all know that Dr. Christian Barnard was the first doctor to perform a heart transplant surgery. Here we have an extract of his speech wherein he narrates an experience which has changed his perspective of life altogether. Let's find out what led to such a dramatic transformation. So how did what incident changed him to such a big transformation? We'll see. More and more as I near the end of my career. So these are the words spoken directly by Christian Barnard. So more and more as I near the end of my career, is becoming old, is coming to the end of his career. As a heart surgeon, my thoughts have turned to the consideration of, he keeps on thinking of why people should suffer, why people are suffering. What is the reason behind their suffering? Suffering seems so cruel, prevalent in the world today. Very prevalent means very common. Cruelly, everybody is suffering. That looks very prevalent, very common in this world today. Do you know that of the 125 million children born this year, in a year, is saying in that particular year which is mentioning, if and approximately 125 million children are going to be born that year, in that 12 million children are unlikely to reach the age of 1. Before they reach the age of 1, they will die. And another 6 million will die before the age of 5. Before they reach 5 years, another 6 million will die. And of the rest, many will end up as mental or physical cripples. So many will have cripples, means disability, physical inability or mental inability. The remaining majority of the children. Why does all this incident happen in this world? This was in the mind of Christian Barnard. That question kept on going in his mind often. My gloomy thoughts probably stem from an incident I had a few years ago. Why these kind of questions repeatedly came to his mind? Because of one particular incident which happened in his life. One minute I was crossing the street. So one minute, a few years ago, this incident happened. In 1 minute, I was crossing the street with my wife. He was crossing the street with his wife, and the next minute, a car had hit me and knocked me into my wife. He- Uh, at that particular moment, a car comes and hits him, and he's thrown to his wife, and both of them are thrown aside. And what happens to his wife? She was thrown into the other lane, other side of the lane, other side where the vehicles are coming. He was hit here in this particular lane, and his wife was thrown to the other lane and struck by a car coming from the opposite direction. And she was hit by a car which was coming from the opposite direction as well. So during the next few days after that accident happened, they both, himself and his wife, they were admitted in the hospital. And I experienced not only agony and fear, not only did he experience agony, pain and fear, but anger also. What kind of anger? I could not understand. So let's go to the next page now. I could not, that's page number 68. I could not understand why my wife and I had to suffer. So he couldn't understand why we had to undergo or we have to face such a cruel accident and why we had to suffer. Because I had what that incident, no, that accident, how big was that accident was. I had 11 broken ribs, no ribs in the body, this particular body, and a perforated lung. So perforated lung here means a damaged lung. So he had 11 broken ribs, in his chest and a perforated lung. My wife had a badly fractured shoulder. So shoulder was fractured over and over. I asked myself, why should this happen to us? I had work to do. I had a work to do. I am a doctor. I have to treat many patients who are having heart ailments. And why should I suffer? Why should this happen to us? I had work to do after all. There were patients waiting for me to operate on them. So many patients are waiting for my arrival because I had to operate them. My wife had a young baby who needed her care, and we had a young baby, and the baby needed my wife. So, why should we suffer in such a manner? This question was in the mind of Christian Bernard. My father, had he still been alive, so he thought what his father would have told. My father, if he has been alive, my father would have told, my son, it's God's will. That's the way God tests you. See, God is testing you. And his father was not alive at that moment. He thought, had I asked my father why this incident happened, my father would have told, my son, this is the way God wants to test you. Suffering ennobles you, makes you a better person. Ennobles, makes you morally noble. It makes you to become the right person, a moral person. The more and more you suffer. That's what he thought his father would have answered. Because whenever whenever you are moral or whenever incident happens, you always try to think from your father's point of view, what your father would have advised you or told you. Then he wondered that is the advice his father would have told. But as a doctor, I see nothing noble in a patient thrashing around in a sweat-soaked bed. Now, what is the moral which we learn by seeing a patient who was put in the hospital in a sweat-soaked, very wet, no, wet with sweat in that bed? No, somebody is thrashing in that bed with mind clouded in agony. You know what kind of an attitude will be in the patient's mind who's in a hospital. I don't see anything moral in such a person who's admitted there. Nor can I see nobility in the crying of a lonely child in a ward at night. But when I see a lonely child, in the children ward where the child has been admitted, and the kind of cry he does, or the kind of agony, the pain he goes, I don't see any moral in that. In those days, they didn't have sophisticated heart surgery, and in those days, they didn't have well advanced, heart surgery. They didn't have. I've always found the suffering of children particularly heartbreaking, especially because of the total trust in doctors and nurses. And he's telling the kind of suffering which children undergo, which he had seen in his hospital. He's telling it's heartbreaking. He was not able to bear it because at least a grown-up person or an adult would understand that he can't trust the doctor completely. That doctor is somebody who will try his best, but a child looks at a doctor as a god, because he trusts that a doctor or a nurse only can cure them. And when he comes to know that sometimes he can't cure, and the kind of pain the children undergo, that puts him in agony. They believe you are going to help them. If you can't, they accept their fate. Then finally, when they think, no, it is my fate, the doctor also can't cure me, they go through mutilating surgery and afterwards they don't complain. At one stage, what these children have mutilating surgery, mutilate, no, they have to undergo surgery where some parts of the body will be removed. And after that, they don't complain. After that, they don't ask for anything. So he has looked at all this incident, and that is why that question came to his mind. Why should people go through all this suffering? When he was having such an attitude or such a mind, no, one day, one morning, several years ago, I witnessed what I call the Grand Prix. A few years later, he happened to visit a place. There he happened to watch. He's comparing. No, it's not a Grand Prix. Grand Prix, it is like an international motor racing and the ground where people all will race and go. Like that, an incident he happened to see in a hospital, in a children's hospital, Red Cross Children's Hospital. One morning, several years ago, I witnessed what I call the Grand Prix of Cape Town's Red Cross children. He belongs to South Africa. In Cape Town, he happened to go to Red Cross Children's Hospital there. It opened my eyes to the fact that I was missing something in all my thinking about suffering, something basic that was full of solace for me. So this is the place which taught him a lesson, or which made him to realize that being alive is the sole thing for which we have to celebrate. That's the most important thing for us to celebrate. So he learned the reason, or he found consolence for his suffering. So what happened? So there he happened to watch like a Grand Prix in that hospital, like a motor race. So what really happened? What happened there that morning was that a nurse had left a breakfast trolley unattended. In the next picture, you can see the trolley, isn't it? Trolley, it is given here. So the nurse who was pushing the trolley with the breakfast, she just left it on the way, and she happened to go back to bring some other thing. And very soon this trolley was commanded, as it was left, this was commanded here, means it was controlled by, we'll go to the other side, by an intrepid crew of two. Intrepid here means a bold and daring. Two children happened to push that trolley. In that, one assumed, how children play, any game, one will be a driver, one will be a conductor, one will, likewise they used to play. Now there in that particular hospital, one assumed himself as a driver and another one as a mechanic. So likewise they posed. And the most important thing here is the mechanic provided motor power by galloping along behind the trolley with his head down. So the one who posed himself as a mechanic, he was holding the trolley behind him and he was bending his head down and he was pushing the trolley. While the driver, he was seated in the front. You can see in that picture given in the textbook. The driver seated on the mower deck. Mower deck means in the front deck mower, that slanting post, where it is there. Held on with one hand, he was holding the trolley with one hand and steered by scraping his foot on the floor and just pushing the foot on the floor, he was moving. The choice of roles was easy. Why means the one who was pushing the trolley was the mechanic, was totally blind. He can't see anything. So only his head was down and he was pushing. And the driver had only one arm. He has an amputated. Amputated means the arm has been removed. Only one arm he had. Actually, the picture is wrong. Okay, the picture is wrong. Actually, instead of drawing, putting the driver, they've made it as a mechanic, and the mechanic they made as the driver. So don't mind about that picture. That picture is wrong. So like that, they happened to do it, and it was this time when the doctor entered. They put on quite a show that day, judging by the laughter and shouts of encouragement of the rest of the patient. The other children who were in the hospital, they were encouraging, cheering. So much of laughter was there. It was much better entertained, as if a real Grand Prix event was going on. So much of fun was around that room. Much better than anything anyone puts on at the Indianapolis 500 car race. Indianapolis is a place where car race takes place. The 500 car race, like that enthusiasm was shown in that hospital in the children ward. There was a grand finale of scattered plates and silverware before the nurse and ward's sister caught up with them, scolded them and put them back to bed. And there was so much of enthusiasm. They can say the plates being scattered and the silverware before the silverware and the plates, they were all about to be fallen, that sound which it made, until suddenly the nurse came and scolded them and put them back to the bed. So this incident changed the doctor's mind, because he knew the real problem of these two children. Let me tell you about these two. Who was this mechanic? The mechanic was all of a 7-year-old son, 7 year, no, maybe a first standard going or a second standard old. One night, when his mother and father were drunk, what really happened to this particular boy? Why was he blind? Was one night when his mother and father were drunk, his mother threw a lantern, the light, where they carry light. Father, the mother, they both were engaging in a big fight. His mother threw a lantern at his father, and that lantern missed his father, and the lantern broke over the child's head and shoulders. So it fell on the child's head and on his shoulders. And because of this, what happened? He suffered severe third-degree burns on the upper part of the body, third-degree burn, and lost both his eyes. How severe was that burn was? Because of that incident, he became blind. He lost his vision. At the time of the Grand Prix, he was a walking horror with disfigured face. Now, when he was pushing the trolley and going, his face was it's not such a beautiful face or something which somebody will love to look at. But there, nothing was considered like that. It was like his face itself was like an horror, was a disfigured face and a long flap of skin hanging from the side of his neck to the body. No, a big part of the skin was hanging from his neck to his body. Skin, no, like that it will be hanging. It's not stuck fully also. We'll move on to the next page, the last page. To his body. So the last line here, as the wound healed, so for that boy, after a few days, as the wound healed around his neck, his lower jaw became gripped in a mass of fibrous tissue. So this lower jaw, he couldn't open it well. It became gripped with a mass of fibrous tissue. So that is stuck something. So this jaw couldn't make any movement. The only way this little boy could open his mouth was raise his head. The only way he can open his mouth feeding is he has to raise his head. That is the way he can open, only from the upper part. That is the way he can open. When I stopped by to see him after that race got over and the doctor went closer, the boy was enthusiastically saying, we won. That enthusiasm the child was giving, he didn't mind about his own suffering. And he was laughing. Then the next boy, another boy who was sitting in the front mower, the trolley's driver I knew better. A few years earlier, I had successfully closed a hole in his heart. For that particular boy, it was this doctor who treated him, and he had a heart problem. It was this doctor who blocked the hole in his heart. He had returned to the hospital and after that, he has returned to the hospital. He got operated and he got cured, and again he returned back because he had a malignant tumor on the bone, a cancer. He had bone cancer. A few days before that race was taking place, this shoulder and arm were amputated. Very few days before, both his entire shoulder and arm, both has been amputated, both has been cut. There was little hope of recovery. You don't know how long he will survive. There was little possibility of his recovery. After the Grand Prix, after that racing which they were doing, he proudly informed me that the trolley's wheels were not properly oiled. Now, after that, the boy came and told, when he sat in the front, he said, the wheels, the oil, it is not creased properly because that rust sound has come. And he had full confidence in the mechanic. He says that wheel was not good, but I knew I had more confidence in the mechanic, the one who was pushing, because he trusted that he will move faster and also he will stop at the right time. And suddenly, the next side. Suddenly I realized that those two children had given me a profound lesson, a very great lesson in getting on with the business of living. So this is what he learned. So whatever has happened, there is no use in regretting and worrying about what has happened so far. Those two children were living in such a manner. They didn't worry, or they didn't keep cursing God, or they didn't keep thinking of the things which they lost. They were just living at the moment. Because the business of living is joy in the real sense of the word, not just something for pleasure. So the real business of living is not joy in the real sense of the word. Not, not that how the world takes you, not something giving you pleasure, amusement, recreation. That is what is not the thing which you have to celebrate in this world. The business of living is the celebration of being alive. You are alive now. This moment you are getting. So celebrate that moment. That's what the doctor realized. Not worrying about why I'm suffering, what can I do tomorrow? Tomorrow will I get into trouble or will my life be better? That's not the thing which you have to worry at all. You celebrate your present situation. That's the greatest lesson he learned from those two children. Finally, the last paragraph. I had been looking at suffering from the wrong end. Then he realized that I have been looking at suffering from the wrong end. You don't become a better person because you're suffering. That's what you have to learn. Because you're suffering a lot, that doesn't mean you're going to become a better person. But you become a better person because you have experienced suffering. Because you're suffering, you are not going to be a better person. But after you suffer and come out of your suffering, that teaches you that teaches you how to become a better person. That is living in the present. So we can't appreciate life. See, if you don't get into trouble, now you may not know the importance of the present moment which you're getting. We can't appreciate life if you haven't known darkness. Once, if you have been in darkness, only then you will know the value of light. If there is no electricity for 1 or 2 days, and the third day when you get light, you know the value of light. So likewise only, sometimes darkness is needed in our life to know the value of light in our life. Nor can we appreciate warmth if we never suffered cold. You can't know the value of being warm unless you have suffered cold. So suffering is very important to know the value of a present situation. So these children showed me that it is not what you have lost that is important. What is important is what you have left. So the most important thing is not what you have lost in your life, but the thing which you have to celebrate is what has been left still. That is your life. No, your life. You are alive. That itself is a great blessing for you. So that's the greatest lesson which the great doctor Christian Barnard learned from the children. So they say, a child is the father of man. Father of man. There are so many things which you can learn from uh, the child. They tell us that happiness is free of cost. You don't need to go to a very luxurious place, or you needn't spend so much of money to be happy. Simple things can make you happy. That's what a child teaches us. So that's what is this lesson. Well, children, I hope you all would have understood and enjoyed this lesson, which has been given by Christian Bernard. Uh, so you can start writing the summary for this lesson and you can submit it to me after you finish. Well, thank you. I'll meet you in yet another class with a new topic. Until then, this is your English master, Sudha Chandran signing off. Goodbye. Have a nice day.